Hey, everybody. We are here with a very fun guest this week, and we're going to talk to you about air sex and improv for flirting. So buckle in because it's going to be a fun one. But before that, I do have the review of the week. So if you hear your review read, reach out to us and you will get a bundle of sex and relationship books. So this week's review is called Unfiltered and Insightful. This podcast makes you think. It's raw and unfiltered. So buckle up for some bold conversations about sex and the human condition. So thank you to this reviewer, and I'm glad that you feel that it is bold and insightful at the same time. We will try to keep delivering on that today as well. Let me officially introduce today's guest. Chris Trew is a comedian and improv coach living in New Orleans. He's been featured at over 75, that's a lot, comedy festivals in North America and seen on MTV, America's Got Talent, and GQ Magazine. He runs Comedy House New Orleans, Hell Yes Fest, and teaches improv comedy all over the world. So welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. Heather, is the beard good enough for the episode?
Chris is combing his beard, you guys. The beard looks beautiful. So if you're not watching on YouTube, you guys will have to go check out Chris's beard.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. What a delightful way to spend a Friday afternoon. Let's get into it.
Thank you. Yeah, let's get into it. So I'm going to tell the backstory of how I stalked you online and how I found you. So air sex, people are like, what? When I mention it. Air sex is an interesting thing that I will let you describe more, but I had seen a performance of air sex back in the day. And then here in St. Pete, Florida, where I live, I had gone to sort of a sex positive type event where there were performers, scantily clad, like fire spinner people and stuff. And for whatever reason, this is just super random. It triggered my brain to be like, whatever happened to air sex? Because it had been a number of years ago. So I went down the internet rabbit hole and I was like, I don't know if air sex is still happening. What is going on? We definitely need to make sure this is still happening. Let me find the creator of air sex. And so then I found Chris on Twitter and Instagram, and he followed me back, and then he posted some stuff about improv, and I commented, and then that led to a Zoom call. And here we have it, folks. Chris is actually on the podcast now. So I feel like we're manifesting something. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, what's so sweet about that story, Heather, and this may be common for you. This is just not that common for me, but we actually got on a Zoom call just to meet and hang out. And that was not a podcast. We actually were like, what is going on with each other's things, and how can we be in each other's lives? And it was a real life, hangout.
It was a Zoom hangout.
It's just funny because people like us, I think, normally we would have recorded that. We would have been like, let's do this right now. But anyway, I mean that in a sweet way.
I agree with you. And I appreciate you saying that. And I mean, I think this podcast is also about connection. And I think the idea of just connecting to connect and being curious and not cool, let's use this for content necessarily all the time,
Totally. It was very genuine, very kind. And So about air sex,
yes, please.
It was
tell the people.
So air sex, it's called the Air Sex Championships, is a comedy show that I have been running since around 2008, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It's like air guitar, but with fucking instead of with pretend fucking, right? So it's
let's clarify. Pretend fucking, people. It's legal.
It's an individual act. People joke with me all the time. They're like, well, can I bring my girlfriend, boyfriend with me? It's like, well, not on stage, because you wouldn't bring a real guitar to an air guitar show and then just actually hold a real guitar but pretend to play it. It's not the dry humping championships, right? It is the rare case, Heather, where the name of the show is actually what is going on. People are having sex with the air.
Oh my God.
So at its root, at its core, it's a comedy show. My background is in comedy. My background is in doing live comedy shows. So, but it has organically taken on a very sex positive feel because we don't want. I mean, there's a ton of reasons, but just to give you some broad strokes here, it's a very vulnerable thing to do. in public at a
It is.
large music venue to get up there and pretend to have sex. And so we want people to feel comfortable doing that. So it's very, there are celebrity guest judges and there is a winner, but we work really hard for it to not be like who's the hottest and who fucks the best.
Oh yeah.
It's so not the vibe. And it's very silly and weird and of course
kind of
sexual
hot a little bit too.
And it can I'll let the audience decide that, it can be. Some people come to it and it's like basically like a sketch comedy routine where it's like, what would it be like if the post office guy ended up delivering me a package of his balls and then I opened it and licked his balls and had to sign for the package afterwards or whatever, right? Like, but also sometimes people are like, actually I'm in the mood and I'm feeling sexy and I'm going to show you how I like actually fuck. And both these things happen in the same show. And just a little bit more context, then I'll shut up for a minute.
No, this is great.
The show is at its core a comedy show. So it's not like you're buying a ticket to go watch this really intimate thing and it's like grimy and like
totally.
Very much like I also have a big pro wrestling background. So a lot of the pomp and circumstance of pro wrestling, like the pageantry of it. And it's like that is a big part of the air sex experience, right? So it's not just like who wants to come up here next and pull out their fake dick. It's like, no. Like this next person has a thoughtful idea combined with music, with the caring element of like the host and judges, like really supporting you. It ends up being like a really bizarrely sweet and comedically smart and sexual night.
Yeah. It's really I have to say, like, based on what I knew of air sex, I was also just curious, like, who is the person behind air sex? And you are probably sweeter than I was expecting. You're a very, like, kind person.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That means a lot. And I think I understand what you're saying because I've done a decent amount of press for the show. The show has had these flirtations with like some somewhat mainstream-ish success. Yeah. And so I've done some press runs with it. And I have heard, like people have had to say things like, this is not like some horny bro dude has came up with a way to watch people dry
so
hump.
Entertaining, you guys. So we will include some clips in the show notes for sure. Like maybe Chris, you could pick your favorites and we'll link to them in the notes so you guys can check them out. But like I had the privilege of being at one of these in person. And like for me, like my sense of humor, like I love anything that strikes me as like absurd. And this just like so perfectly like fit that bill. Like this is just outrageous.
Yeah. And when you take so now I'm bridging like my comedy education world with air sex, but like when you take something as absurd as sex can be, right? When you take something as absurd as that and you insert like a framework around it that people can understand. It's basically like American Idol, but for fucking, so it's like people can understand that.
Yes. That's a great way to explain it.
And then people are like, "Oh, it becomes very easy to laugh at and be entertained by it, as opposed to that uncomfortable thing that I think a lot of people first hear, which is like a live comedy show where people are having sex. No, thank you. It's like
exactly.
It's like, open yourself up a little bit, but also those are the same people that think they would think they would hate sex toys or communicating about sex. It's all the same people, right?
Yeah. We don't have any of those people on this show. I'm just kidding. But no, I actually have a very diverse audience. So I love that about my audience. But yeah, so I do want to know, like, how did you decide to get into air sex? Like, what was sort of the lead up to this unique journey?
It was pretty organic, Heather, because I was in Austin at the time and air guitar shows were getting very, very popular. I was doing a lot of creative work and emceeing for this movie theater called the Alamo Drafthouse that has since blown up. Now it's a national thing. But at the time, it was only in Austin, and it was a big part of Austin's early, this place is weird and creative and very unique, right? Drafthouse had a lot to do with that. So I'm co-hosting, judging these air guitar shows. And for a special one-off on Valentine's Day 2007, I believe, we had the idea, mostly came from Tim League, who is the owner of the Alamo Draft House. He was like,
Okay.
let's do this air sex thing. I saw a video of people doing this in Japan. And the Japanese video was like really low stakes and low status. It was it was basically like, if you're lonely and sad and looking for something to do, like, come see what these guys are doing in this tiny theater in Japan. And it was like it was what people think of air sex now a lot of times. It's like, it was very low stakes. It was very like,
got it.
And so we basically were like, what if we turned this all the way up? What if we injected some of like my improv background and that mentality? Yeah. What if we poured a heavy dose of sex positivity on it? What if we sprinkle in some of the wrestling stuff and just sports in general? And after years of doing this to varying degrees of success, it it started to really take shape in 2010, 2011, where it was like, this is it. This is the show.
Okay. And did you have like, who does air sex? Like, what kind of person is like, I'm going to sign up for an air sex competition?
Yeah, who does air sex? Great question. And you might be surprised. A lot of different types of people do. I've seen, of course, there's the people who lean towards performing. There's your comedians, your improvisers, your sketch comedy people. There's actors. These people are all comfortable being vulnerable on stage, right? But there's also like the next wave of those people who are maybe comfortable being on stage, but don't have like a trained comedic eye. So not to say that they're not funny, but people like maybe singers or burlesque dancers and burlesque dancers. I mean, I think are also funny, but they're not doing it for laughs. Anyway, I don't want to get in the weeds here. But you get my point. It's like there's that wave of people,
like a podcast host,
But then there's also, Heather, there's people who like the same kind of people who like karaoke. I think are candidates to do this. There is a like horny karaoke vibe to it, where it's like where people are like, you know what? I never thought I would have done this, but fuck it. You know what? I'm going to do that thing that I told my friends happened to me, on that weird date a few months ago. I'm going to go reenact that, and so they get up there, and because when you see the show, and this happens. This is a testament to the show, something I'm very proud of. But it's like when we start the show in a brand new city, we might have like 3 people who have signed up. And honestly, we need like 8 or 9 for a full show.
Yeah.
But I never get nervous because what happens every time is people see a few and then they realize that it looks fun. It looks safe. I'm being taken care of. The crowd is into it. And suddenly people feel like they can participate. And then we end up having too many people. It happens every time.
That's amazing.
Well, almost every time. It happens most of the time.
Wow. Did you actually have too many people who want to perform?
Yeah.
And do you like workshop this with people at all? Or do they have to like audition or like?
No, that would make my life simultaneously easier and harder. Because it's so in the moment. And I think a lot of, honestly, here I am bridging all the things together again. But I think so much of the best things in life are spontaneous and in the moment. And that can be true for comedy. It can be true for sex. It can be true for many life experiences. So I don't like the idea personally of pulling into Portland on a Thursday and saying like, all right, come to the auditions Thursday afternoon. If you make it, you're in the show Friday. It's like, no, I actually want that raw in the moment energy on Friday night. Now, the thing that comes along with that, though, is like the anxiety of who is going to be doing
I don't know what these people are going to do.
Right.
So that kind of brings us a little bit into improv. So, and I know we connected on that online a little bit. So like I had a friend in Chicago who actually had like an improv for mental health. I've recommended improv to clients over the years, and think it can kind of help with, social anxiety, or just like censoring themselves. That's something I run into a lot with sex therapy is people censor themselves quite a bit just because of how our culture is, I think. But I think has so many applications. Like what do you think since you're the pro on this?
Well, yeah, I think improv is this like communication Swiss Army knife that really does so many things for so many people. It teaches you how to remain in the moment. It teaches you how to be a great active listener. It teaches you how to roll with the punches. It can increase like charisma and charm and just help you keep things moving. And it basically like it trains you to like never not know what to say. And so what I've seen over the years is like people take improv classes for all kinds of different reasons, and more people these days are taking them for non-comedic reasons. Now they end up learning comedy because it's impossible to not. At least the way I teach it.
I like that.
Even if a company brings me in and is like, we need you to do an improv for a networking event because we're all going to this big thing next week and we're all nervous. Like, I can do that, but you're going to learn comedy in the process. Like, I can't turn that part off of it because it's so organic. It's so natural. So, and also, I mean, you mentioned it like your friend, mental health. People take improv classes for mental health reasons. People take improv classes to learn how to talk to people they are attracted to. It really is this bizarre superfood of skills that you get when you learn how to do improv.
I love that. And yeah, I don't think that was something I initially realized. I always thought it's like, this is just a pathway if you want to do like sketch comedy. Being from Chicago, we have Second City. So like if you want to do sketch comedy at Second City, you got to like take some classes, or, if you want to do stand up, you should probably take some classes. But yeah, it's for so much more than that. I mean, it also just seems fun. Like sometimes just for fun.
Totally. That's so funny. I recorded a video about this the other day from my YouTube, but it's like I forget to tell people how much fun it is. Like whenever I'm going through the list of reasons, it's like fun is always like the last one for some reason. So I'm like, it does this and you'll be a better listener and be less stressed out. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're also going to laugh your ass off and feel connected to other humans. Yeah. And there's all the great things that come along with that. So improv is super fun.
Yeah. I think one of the things I've learned just being like a private practice therapist for a long time was that adults struggle with like rest and play. And it's problematic and it causes mental health issues and relationship issues. And I think when you were just explaining that, it's like, well, it's going to help your stress and it's going to help your networking. It's going to help blah, blah, blah. It's almost like we feel like we have to justify fun, I think, because I think we've just gotten to this point in the culture where it's like, I must be productive and I must achieve this and I must, make this much money and I must, whatever. And it's like, or just have fun.
Yeah. It's so wild, right? Yeah. Because as we get older, as we become, more set in our ways as adults, we start to have solutions to all the problems, and it starts to become part of our personality, part of the way we move through the world. We have solutions for all the problems, and we don't want any more problems. I am no longer curious. I'm not curious. I don't want new experiences, Yeah. And improv untangles all that. Improv is like, well, guess what? You're not only going to have new experiences. You're going to be with new people. You're going to work your creative muscles. You're going to become more curious about other things in life. You are going to be a better listener. You're going to have techniques to dissolve conflicts. Yeah. It's like, it really is the thing. Like
it overlaps with sex from what you're saying too. Cause like, people are afraid to have conversations about sex. They don't know how to start the conversation about sex. They're censoring themselves and not sharing what they actually want. There's kind of this like, oh, well, I should be this way, or I should say this, but not that. And then instead of just saying what they mean or what they want to say, because there's like this fear there. And I kind of look at improv as like a way to overcome fear too.
And I'm thinking of this example like right now in this moment, but it's like, I'm thinking about maybe what one of the most difficult conversations might be to have about sex, which is like someone's preferences, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like if person A is talking to person B about something they want to try or they are curious about, I imagine that one of the most difficult things is getting over that fear of opening up, right? Yeah. But if the people involved, if they use the same technique that we use in improv, which is yes-anding, which is like the yes is acknowledging what you said, that is your reality. I heard that. And the and is what I add to it so that it becomes a back and forth dialogue.
I love that.
If you were to do that when someone is having that type of conversation or any type of loaded conversation or difficult, I'm not passing judgment. I don't mean loaded like that, right. That is, but I just feel like if for whatever reason, if you're going to have a hard time having conversation XX, then consider using a yes and technique, which is what we do in improv to keep that conversation going. So then it becomes like, hey, I'm really curious about having sex in a public place. I'm picking like a thing, right? I do not condone doing that in places where you might get arrested unless you have
unless arrest is a risk you're willing to take.
Exactly. Maybe being arrested is part of your cake. I'm not judging.
Right. But also consent, and people who are there in public have not necessarily all consented to be watching your ass having sex. Yeah.
Okay, give me a different example.
Okay. What could be? How adventurous are we feeling today?
Okay, let's just like pick a position, right? Let's say there's a couple that's had very that's again no judgment, had very basic sex.
Yeah,
right?
Vanilla sex. It's routine. Let's say they've been together for a long time and they kind of just know what works and they do the same thing all the time.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
And side note, no shame.
It's great if it's working for you. Yeah, my whole thing is like, if it's working for you, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But if it's not working, then do something different.
Yeah, okay. My kink is overqualifying all the examples, so this is going great for me. Okay, so couple.
So I hear you have an overqualifying kink, and I accept that about you.
Yes. So imagine person A being like, I am really curious about trying this position.
Okay.
It's like I think the baggage they might have is how will that be accepted? But if the other person is trained to accept what the other person says as their truth, as their reality, then it doesn't become like, it becomes more about actively listening and starting the conversation. So it's like, yes, I understand you want to try that. And maybe the and is like, the best possible and I would assume in that moment is like, yes, and I've been thinking that same thing. But like you also might get, yes, and I didn't know that about you. Tell me more about this side of you. That's also sounds like a really good outcome.
Right.
Well, basically, yes, and prevents you from like denying what someone's wishes are, right? It doesn't mean that you have to do it. It's like yes, and isn't like agreeing to everything the other person says. We don't do that in improv either. It's going with it, where it's going with the idea. Like Heather, if me and you were doing a comedy scene and I'm in jail for public sex, from before. Shit, I'm in jail. But if I were to say to you, like, if my first line was like, hey, I see you have the keys to the cell, like, let me out. Yes, and doesn't mean that you have to let me out.
And I would be like, Chris, we got to negotiate that. I'm not so sure.
Great. I like that. So that yes and is acknowledging that I just made you the prison guard. Like no but is you being like, Chris, stop playing, get out of your room, we have to go to work. That is completely denying it.
The more we're talking about this, it's fascinating because like this is dovetailing with the Gottman couples counseling research where they talk about bids for attention. So it's like when your partner tries to connect with you, are you kind of like, cool, I'm going to meet you where you're at and we're going to connect. So it's like called turning towards, or like turning away, where you kind of like totally ignore that they said anything about being in jail. And you're just like, it's raining out. I should probably get an umbrella. So you're like, did you hear what I said? Are you present with me? What's happening? And then there's just straight up ignoring it too. So it's like, this is like super, super predictive of like what marriages succeed and which ones don't.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like the same thing.
Yeah. It's totally the same thing. So
and
it's
then
like,
in the kink world,
go with it
too. Like have you heard don't yuck my yum?
Yes, for sure.
Right. So that's like, I feel like that's also like a yes and.
Big time. I mean, really, I'm saying from the perspective of like the improv guy is you have to consider always being the kind of person who is built to listen and accept what someone else is saying and then be willing to add to it and always be curious. Always be curious.
This is like spiritual advice, honestly, because now I'm also thinking about how like enlightenment is non-resistance and like yes and is non-resistance.
Totally. I mean, it's
wow. We're getting really
okay.
deep, you guys.
So now I have to, Heather, God dang it, now I have to add that to the list of reasons why to take an improv class.
I
for
know. I just
spiritual
gave you like way
enlightenment.
more.
Oh my God. So stressful.
No pressure to like deliver on these results in class.
Like my next class is going to be on the top of a mountain at sunset.
Yeah. You're going to have the best sex of your life. But it does seem like you super enjoy it. I mean, who do you think would be someone who like should take an improv class?
Okay, I'm going to avoid saying everyone because
I know, but I think we've established really.
Yeah. But really, it's like I think if anyone's listening to this right now, and from the moment I started talking about people getting on stage and making things up for comedic purposes, and then you were like, and you started to check out, and you were like, "Okay, I'm still listening because I love Heather, but I'm checking out right now because I would never do that." Really, that person,
really?
because what they don't realize fully is that this is not, it's not show up, be funny. Those people have the
I like that. Okay.
most difficult time.
Yeah, that sounds like so much pressure, and I feel anxious thinking about it.
Yeah, it's like, it's so I have to, whenever I'm doing a corporate workshop, like a lot of times a company will bring me in for some team building, I have to lead with that because there are people there who are like, already have their jokes ready. They're like, they're going to do it no matter what. They're going to shove it down the other person's throat. They're just like, I'm here. I got my ideas, and they're not willing to change. They're not curious about the other person's thoughts. Anyway, so like to the people listening to this who are like, who think that improv is not for them, I think they stand to gain the most because once they realize that it's not about show up, be funny, it's more about show up, be present, be open-minded, be a good listener. You see pretty quickly all the other places in your life where it can have a profound effect. You're probably going to fight less with your partner. You're probably going to be less annoyed when things don't go your way. You're probably going to be more open to new experiences. And all those things I just said, that like applies to like the individual, to business, and to sex. It's like all these things.
I love it. So what about flirting? I want to help people with flirting because I get people who, you know, I probably get some guys who are kind of like, I don't know how to approach somebody, or I don't want to be creepy, or, you know, I get friend zoned all the time. And I think of flirtation as almost of like a way of life where like I think there's people who like flirt with intention for like a more of a sexual outcome. But I also think like there's people who just flirt with like babies and grandparents is like how I phrase it. You know, it's like, it's just how they interact with the world. And I think there's something really like alive and like fun and like lighthearted about it. And so I'm curious like how improv could like fit in with that, or what would you tell someone who's like, I don't know how to flirt?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think probably a pretty untapped thing, at least for what I do in my business. Like I don't actively market to that necessarily. But if someone were to come to me and say, would this help with that? I would give them a big ol' hell yes. Because
I would think so.
Yeah, because it teaches you how to, I mean, really in improv, we are trying to make the other person look good. You know, so it's like it's like you want them to look good. You want to support them because really, if we're both doing that, it gets easier and funnier, and the art form is hard enough as it is. So like I'm in the business of making it as easy and fun as possible. I would say, you in improv, you would learn how to really focus on what the other person is saying, how to like actively listen. People love being heard. And also there's some improv tricks too that are like that I think work in relationships. Like we have this saying. It's a don't open the box. Don't open the box. So if the scene is funny because the box won't open, don't open the box. So the relationship version of this is like someone's telling you their problems. Someone's telling you about their hard day. Don't try and fix that problem. Be a good listener. Like be a good listener and like let them communicate their feelings. Don't try to fix their feelings. You know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of this is about like holding space.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like just allowing someone else to be fully as they are.
Yeah,
and accepting that.
Totally. And it's like, to me, it's like flirting, like having a good conversation is like, it's like playing tennis almost in that like, I don't get to decide my next move until you make your next move. Like in terms of like conversations. What was that?
It's so hard, I think, because I'm just going to like wrap myself out a little bit. It's like my brain definitely wants to like go ahead. And I know we all have that tendency. Although I'm curious, like, have you kind of programmed that out of yourself through improv training?
Oh, for sure. I mean, not to say that I'm perfect, but like I can catch myself now if I'm like, especially, the kind of people who it may have even happened on this conversation at some point. But if it's like I'm about to say something, you say something, and then I'm like, well, I'm still going to say what I was going to say when she's done talking. It's like that's not really how good communication works. Like it's not like. I mean, I'm still allowed to make that same point if it's relevant, but the conversation may have evolved. It may have changed. And a lot of people who I think have issues with flirting or who are maybe don't have the confidence in that, like in that area, they are going to say what they're going to say. Like they have their map and they're going to this destination, even though there are road closures and things all along the way. So improv really teaches you to stay present, right?
Oh,
to go back to the tennis thing, what I mean is like I hit the ball over the net.
Yeah.
I can't decide anything yet until you hit the ball back over to me, right? I don't get to run to this side of the court and say, Heather, hit it over here.
Right.
Especially with flirting. Like if me and you are flirting, Heather, and if I'm thinking like, I send this text or whatever, and I'm like, oh, she's going to, like, when she says this, I'm going to say this, or I need her to say this. And then those things don't happen, which I would say is statistically likely that you're not going to say the exact thing I'm looking for.
Right.
Then like I have a choice, right? I can roll with the punches. I can go with the flow. I can treat this accident or this mistake like maybe it's a gift instead of like judging the moment. I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to be like, well, she's clearly out on me because she said blank. It's like, maybe that was your way. I mean, it's TBD to me.
I actually really like that idea. My dating coach friend, Evan, who I'm also trying to get on the show, he kind of says like, assume other people are into you in the way that you're interacting. And that's kind of what I'm hearing between the lines of what you're saying. Like, it's like part of the yes and is like, we're flowing with it. We're going with it. We're not making meaning. We're not like stopping and analyzing and like psyching ourselves out.
Yeah. It's just an improv. It's not a conducive use of our time to be judging every single line of dialogue. So when you get that into your system, like when you build that into who you are as someone who talks to other people, you really become kind of bulletproof in that way. Because you're like, I wasn't expecting you to say a certain thing. I am truly in this moment right now. I am not only talking to you so that I can get something out of you. It's not like a pickup artist thing. It's more of like, I am like in this moment with you and there are no mistakes. There are only gifts. So like that can be really hard for people who have had a lot of bad luck.
That's true.
If you've had bad luck, hearing what I just said, it may be like, yeah, it's easy to say. It's like, and I totally get that. But I do think that improv is one of those things that like untangles a lot of that bad luck. It makes you feel like, it reminds you of like how pure and productive conversations can be if you treat them a certain way.
I like that. I'm like thinking of certain clients while you're saying this stuff. I'm like, I hope they listen to this one. But what about like approaching people? Like, I think like approach anxiety is for sure a thing. And, there's kind of like some backlash these days about dating apps and stuff. And so I almost feel like I don't know if I'm imagining this. I'm curious, actually, if any listeners want to reach out about this and let me know what their experience is. I think there's maybe some movement back towards meeting people in person. But then I also think especially younger generations who didn't grow up, who have had like devices and screens and whatever, it's kind of like, do I have the skill set to like approach people in person? And like, what does that look like? And how do I not be a creep? And so like, do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, that sounds really difficult to me. Like I understand that, and I feel for people who have the impression that they are ill-equipped to do that. I think all you can do is figure out what works for you, and then explore that and get really used to the idea that it might not go your way. Which again is another improv thing, because in improv we are unattached to a specific outcome. I'm not going into the scene.
Such a good life skill.
I'm not going into this scene with Joe, who is like one of the most skilled people I perform with. I think he's brilliant. I can't, when me and Joe walk out,
Yeah.
I'm not like, oh, certified banger coming up, like home run. It's I can't think that way. I have to be like, everything is different.
Yeah.
What's this one going to be? I can rely on us treating each other a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
barring any mistakes because we have that
Yeah.
history. But it's like, I am unattached to that outcome. So let's say it's a boy-girl thing. If boys wants to approach girl, if boy has to be unattached to outcomes and just like be like, of course, this doesn't like excuse you from any like bad behavior.
Right.
But, like you have to be unattached to an outcome. You can't be like no one flirtation can be a referendum on whether or not you should continue flirting with anyone. It's not like, I tell this to people who are trying stand up all the time. It's like, go do an open mic. You have to do 10 open mics. And really, it's like 100.
Ooh, that sounds brutal.
You got to do 10 of them and know one, because you've already made the deal's done. The deal's done. Okay. You're doing 10 of these.
You just commit to 10, period.
You're doing 10. So when the first 4 are like the worst experiences you've had speaking in public, it's like,
right. Like if you didn't need therapy, now you do.
The deal's done. You got to do 6 more. And so I think that kind of mentality might be helpful with this too, where it's like,
I agree.
Be unattached to the outcome.
And I would also say and I think for me, what I advise people on, and I think this goes to the not censoring yourself and the curiosity thing that have kind of become themes of this conversation, is like, what is drawing you to this person? And you're probably naturally curious about something. So just like say that.
Yeah.
You know?
And
then don't care if it goes poorly. And I mean, they might be attached. Like when we're getting really brave and like doing this out in the wild and not just like on dating apps, like you don't know. They could be married. They could be just like not into you. They could be with their friends and just really wanting to hang out with their friends. And all of that has like nothing to do with you. But if you just go up and like say hi or give someone a compliment or like, like if I'm like, hey, couldn't help but notice you combing your luscious beard earlier, maybe I would just say that, like, who is this guy combing his beard at the bar?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That goes back, Heather, to this idea of there are no mistakes, there are only gifts, right?
Yeah.
So the improv version of this is like someone messes up. Big old air quotes for the listeners. Someone messes up. We have a choice. It's like, I can judge that moment. I can be upset or irritated because we're not supposed to do that or whatever. Or it could be like, I can acknowledge that maybe our job is a little bit harder than it was before, but we can still do the thing. We can still connect. We can weave this mistake and make it into a gift. So going back to flirting, I'm thinking about, you hear those stories about like, oh, person A approached person B, said something flirtatious. Person B is partnered up already, but he introduced them to their friend, and it's like, oh my God, that mistake turned into the most beautiful gift,
Yes.
And so if you can have that mentality, which I know is a heavily optimistic mentality, it's hard for a lot of people. I get it, but if you can work that muscle like you're going to the gym, then I think you'd be better off. And that's what improv is. Improv is working that muscle.
I know. And it's so hard. So I don't know if I ever told you this. So I took an improv class. I might have mentioned this in our Zoom call after college. And it was not like comedy per se. It was sort of just like improv acting. But yeah, I do remember being up there and kind of just being like afraid to bomb, because you're like, oh my God, the whole class is watching. And I do think as humans, we're like a little bit wired to like avoid humiliation.
Sure.
And so, it's like, I feel like it's one thing to talk about this, but I do think comedians who go on stage, whether it's stand up or sketch or whatever, are like some of the most brave people like in the world. Because it's like all we're ever really afraid of, whatever it is our emotions. And so I feel like it's a real experience of facing your emotions. And I'm assuming in your classes, you provide like a safe container for that and like support people through it. But I remember being up there and my teacher gave the feedback, like, you just need to go for it. And I'm like, but what if it's terrible? And I was like 22 at the time.
It's tough, but you know, it is undeniable that if you could give yourself over to something like improv, you will conversations that are difficult for you to have will get easier. Arguing will happen less frequently because you'll learn how to diffuse tension with communication. You're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You're going to learn comedy skill. I mean, all the things start to come into play. And
now I want to recruit you to do a workshop together. If you guys want us to do a workshop together, let us know.
I would love that. I think it's I think this material is really cool. It's really, really fun. And I'm grateful to be able to talk about it on something like this, because my whole thing this whole time has been that this shouldn't be hoarded by the comedy people. That's how I got here too. And I perform 3, 4, 5 times a week. I'm still in that world. I'm not but really the best use of improv skills is real life stuff. And sex is a massive part of real life stuff.
Yeah. Oh, and also we need to bring air sex to St. Petersburg, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm in.
So tell people where, because I think you mentioned air sex does carry on in a couple festivals. So tell people where they can find that. And then also where they can find you if they're interested in, some training.
For sure. So air sex still exists. It doesn't tour as frequently as it once did. Not to say it won't ever again, but it used to be an annual 20-city tour, right? Pandemic started.
Fingers crossed, everyone.
Yeah. COVID affected that a little bit, a lot, but the show still lives on at the Sturgis Music Festival in South Dakota. So it's called the Buffalo Chip. I do it every day for 9 days straight at this music festival.
Wow.
It exists every year at the Richmond, Virginia Tattoo Convention.
Interesting.
That's in October. Okay. And there's a couple other things that happen here and there every now and then. But yeah, long live air sex. Long live fake fucking.
100%.
And real fucking.
Yeah. Yes. Right. All the fucking, as long as it's consensual. Yeah. Okay. So my fingers are crossed that I get to be a judge when it comes to St. Pete, but we'll keep people posted if it goes anywhere. Because I think it's super fun and everyone should see it. And then, where do people find you if they're I could use some improv training? What kind of programs do you offer and how should they get in touch? Yeah, so Chris Trew, Trew on Instagram is a really great way to reach out and see what I have going on. For anyone listening to this in the future, maybe in the far future, reach out that way, right? I often do improv classes on Zoom. Sometimes I do membership things where it's hey, join for this, and then you can take a class, every other day for 2 months. I offer a variety of programs. I also do one-on-one stuff too. So for people who want to go faster and have more of an intimate experience, I work with people one-on-one. And we actually are doing improv together on the call. You basically get fast-forwarded through stuff. It's a lot of fun. And, you tell me why you're doing it, and then we customize. I say we, it's me. But I customize the experience for you. So if someone were to say, I'm here because I want to flirt better, then we would customize the exercises towards that. But you can find more information on me at hellyescreative.com. And like I said, I do it for companies too. So team building, one-on-one, all that stuff. Yeah. I think that would be way more fun than the average corporate training.
Oh my God. Yes.
Yes. I'm just imagining trainings I had to do.
It's sorry, Dave and Buster's, with all due respect.
Oh God. Yeah. I gotta freshen that up. So we'll link to all Chris's websites in the show notes. So you can just scroll down if you're on Apple Podcasts, and the links will be right there. But thank you so much for coming on, Chris. This was an awesome conversation, and I think that some people will achieve enlightenment as a result of this. So
I'm heading straight to the mountaintop when we get off this call. All right. And I'm just gonna live there for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I can't get any more enlightened than I am right now.
Buddha position under the tree. Yeah. I like that. Cool. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. And if you have any follow-ups or questions for me or Chris, don't hesitate to reach out. Bye everybody.
Thank you.